being here. If you haven't done so already, please put your name, title, and location into the chat. That will help us again to know who is here. Welcome to our third workshop in a series of 4, and we're super excited to have you as always. Many of you, I'm sure, have been returning. Some of you might be here for the first time. My name is Manuel Colon, and I am proud to be the facilitator of these workshops. And so I'm super excited to be here and know that for me, it's been an honor to be able to work with you and engage in many, great discussions about our implementation for community schools. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce from the Central Coast RTAC, Dr. Ernesto Vela, who's going to give us some welcoming remarks. So Dr. Vela.
Thank you, Manuel. First of all, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you so much for being here, for your presence. This is, as Manuel said, our third installment, and we're very honored to work with Inflection and providing you all of this phenomenal information, hoping that we continue to build on our knowledge. All of us in here are learners, and I don't think anyone's above anyone in that sense, including our RTAC team, which I am very honored and proud to work with. Dr. Jennifer Sahardi, Junet Partida, or Junet Saruk, and we have Herminia Cervantes. You may also be aware, some of you received communication from our office that Ashley Selk is no longer with us. And so we look forward in the next couple of weeks to find her replacement so that she can, or they can continue on, the great momentum built definitely in those schools, districts, and county offices that Ashley supported. So I wanted to give you a brief update on that. We're weeks away from filling that vacancy. But more importantly, just wanted to say that as a Central Coast team, we are honored. We are honored to be able to provide you service as an RTAC. Our learning continues every single day. We reflect a lot. We meet a lot as a team. And your feedback about how we perform, how we deliver services is so important. Certainly through the formal venues or opportunities and surveys and so forth, but also we are all an email, a phone call, a text away from any feedback, questions, concerns that you may have. Certainly I, as the leader of the team, would have open door to any question, suggestion that you have for us. I truly wanted to underscore that because we are very interested in doing the very best work that we can, because you all deserve the best from us. And so I just wanted to say that. And finally, thank you to Inflection, Manuel, and the entire team for putting this together. We are already planning our 24-25 community practice delivery. We should have a calendar to you within the next couple of weeks, certainly before the year ends, so that you know what's coming up in the next school year in terms of our delivery plan. And so with that, thank you again for being here. It's our honor to serve you. And I kick it back over to Manuel. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vela, and really appreciate your partnership and also all the great work that you're doing and the team is doing to support our schools throughout the Central Coast. So thank you so much for that. I also want to introduce the team from Inflection that is here to support, and they kind of will wave as I call their name: Alexa, Elise, and Michelle. You will see them throughout today, and you've seen them throughout the last 3 workshops, and will continue to do so. Before we get started, I wanted to also mention that we do want you to sign in. It's important that we know who is here. And so in the chat, you will see a sign-in sheet, which will help us as well in terms of knowing who is here and providing any additional services and supports. And then we want to invite you to our final workshop, which will be in person. So it'll be really nice to see everybody in person. We know that that's probably the most meaningful way to really go deep with some of these topics. And we know that, as you start to implement, there's a lot of information, and we know that there's a lot of information. And sometimes in such a short amount of time that we do virtually, we're not able to go as deep into some of these topics as possible. And so it's important that, that we do get to see you in person so we can go deeper and be able to engage a little bit more into some of these topics. So we're excited to see you in person. There's going to be 2 workshops. One is going to be in Monterey, in the northern part of the region. That workshop is going to be on May 15th, and that's going to include the counties of Santa Cruz County, San Benito County, and Monterey County. And then we're going to do one in the southern part of the Central Coast, which is going to include San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and Ventura. And that's going to be on May the 21st. So again, we're super excited to see you in person and be able to engage in person, and be able to see you and be in the great Central Coast live and in person. With that, I wanted to start by going over the agenda for today, because it is going to be pretty impactful. We're going to start with a short review. We know that not everybody is able to make every workshop. And so it's important for us to always provide the context and provide a short review of what was covered, and really engage and bridge all of the workshops together, because it really is about learning. And as Dr. Vela said, that we are all learning from each other. Nobody has all the right answers. We're all here to learn and to grow together and to really build community in terms of providing the best services for our students through the community schools implementation. So that's going to be part of the review, and it's going to happen at every workshop as we go through the 4 workshops. Today, we're going to go deeper with the conditions for learning. We know that, again, they're central to the instructional plan and professional learning. And so we're going to go deep with what does that mean? What do the conditions for learning mean, which is part of the framework, one of the 4x4s that we talked about. We're also going to be looking at how we are assessing our readiness for student empowerment and student voice. And what does that mean when we talk about it in terms of as it relates to the classroom? And so again, we're going to engage in a conversation, in a process for us to see, where are we? And then maybe as we develop, some discussion, look to some action planning that will be next steps for us. And then finally, we always want to know what you think, how we can improve. And so we will have a survey and a closing, invite you to some upcoming workshops that we know that you would appreciate it and would enjoy. And so we're gonna share those with you as well. So our objectives for today will be to really go deep with the understanding of the conditions for learning. As I said before, each of these 4x4s have a lot of implication. And so what does the state mean when they talk about the framework for community schools? What do they mean, and what are they intending for us to do? And then really assess the school readiness for implementation strategies for student empowerment and a student-centered classroom. And what does that mean? So we'll have conversation and engage in a self-assessment, and then identify some next steps. We know that throughout today, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to generate ideas for you. I hope that you're taking notes, and I hope that you're writing questions. I hope that you're really thinking ahead in terms of where you are in your implementation. We know that some of you are in planning grants and may have already applied for the grant and are waiting and crossing your fingers, and we hope that you get the grant soon. Some of you are in cohort 1 or cohort 2 and are fully invested in your work. And so we know that everybody is at a different place, but we know that together we will move forward in terms of providing that opportunity for our students. So that's our goal for today and in our engagement. We also know that, we've been really good about our norms, and I don't necessarily want to call them norms. I think we all know that these are part of how we work and why we do the work. And so we want to just thank you for always being mindful of these and engaging in a meaningful way in our discussions and conversations. So we really appreciate it. And like we always say, at any time, please ask questions. Somebody in the room would be able to engage. If I can't answer, or if others can't answer, but this is the place, this is the safe place where we can all come together and learn from each other. So please don't hesitate to either put a question in the chat. If there's an opportunity to unmute and speak, please do so as well. It is an opportunity for all of us to learn. So thank you for doing that. So we're going to get started. As we were thinking of our last workshop, we really went deep with the 4 proven practices. As you are learning and as you are beginning to implement the community schools initiative, and as we begin to implement the community schools framework, the 4 proven practices are very key in that. They're key not only in terms of the implementation, but also the initial steps that need to be taken for you to really engage and to lay a strong foundation for the implementation of community schools. And so the very first of the proven practices, community asset mapping and gap analysis, and really understanding that we need to really do an inventory of everything that's in our community, everything that we already know that is already happening, everything that we can think of in terms of opportunities and resources that exist. And so doing that is very critical. And I believe that many, if not all of you, have already done that. I think one of the things that I also want to point out is that within that need gap analysis is really understanding specifically the assets, and the assets not only that our students, but also that our community brings, and how are we engaging with those assets and bringing them into the classroom. The second proven practice is the integrating and aligning with relevant programs. All over the legislation, all over the statute of law, it's very clear that the intent of community schools implementation is to align everything. This is not an additional program. It's not an additional thing that you have to do or worry about. It is the work. It is what we do. And so the aligning of all of our initiative is critical for this success. So again, this is one of the proven practices, that we need to align everything that we're doing around community schools. The third element in terms of the proven practices is the site-based and LEA advisory councils. Many of you have already named them as community schools advisory committees, but these committees, and they're embedded into the collaborative leadership component, which is critical for success of community schools. And again, there's a lot of literature and a lot of research that backs that collaborative leadership approach. And the idea behind the advisory committees is that they are guiding this process. They are guiding this work. And collaborative leadership is one of the pillars, but within this, it really is about that we are all in it together, that all of the educational partners that are at the table are there to support the implementation and the success of our students. So that is why this proven practice is so important. And then the fourth proven practice is community schools coordinator. Again, we talked about the 20 years, 10 lessons article that we keep, asking everybody to read, because it really is foundational to the implementation of community schools. It continues to state how important this role is. The community schools coordinator, their role is really to take the torch of community schools, really focusing in on the key components in terms of ensuring that we are moving forward with the framework, that we are moving forward with all of these proven practices. The community schools coordinator really takes that lead along with the site level leader to really ensure that everything is, all of our T's are being crossed and all of our I's are being dotted. So they are instrumental in that implementation. Again, these are the 4 proven practices that we went deep with last time that I just wanted to recap. And so at this point, what I want to do is I want to ask, and I think it's in the chat, from these proven practices, which of the ones of the proven practices, and I know they're being put into the chat. So what is one of the proven practices, or I'm sorry, what is one best practice you're already doing through one of the 4 proven practices? What is one need that has surfaced through exploring the 4 proven practices? And if you can share one question you have about the 4 proven practices. So again, these are 3 questions that will help guide us and reflect on what we did last time and kind of reconnect us and ground us for this time. So once again, what is one best practice that you are already doing from these proven practices? What is one need that has surfaced as a result of you engaging a little bit more with the proven practices, or since our last conversation, things that you hadn't considered? And then the third question is, what is one question you have about the 4 proven practices? So I'll give you about a minute to reflect on these and go ahead and put them into the chat. So if you don't mind, go ahead and think about and tell me where you're at as it relates to the 4 proven practices since our last meeting. What is something that you are celebrating in regards to the 4 proven practices? What is a need that has surfaced since the last since the last conversation that you have engaged with and that you're thinking about? And also maybe a question that you still have in regards to the 4 proven practices. Yes. Absolutely. Everybody's been working really hard, as I can see. A lot to celebrate. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Really appreciate it. So, a couple of things, if you don't mind going back to the previous, I think a couple of things that came up that I think are important to mention. First of all, that this process of doing all of these things is going to take time. The second piece is it's important for us to do it as a team. And I know that some of you have shared the struggles or the challenges that you're facing. It's important to bring a team together to really be able to put these things in place. I think that, again, there's key pieces that need to be kind of foundational. But as we start to move forward, please reach out. We do have job descriptions for our community schools coordinator position. So those are things that we'll be able to share with you. I think in terms of looking at an asset mapping and gap analysis, that is part of a process that you want to implement. It doesn't have to be complex. You may want to do it through some kind of a survey. You might want to do it through some kind of a voice circle, but these are components that are part of you just gaining information about the community, about the needs and assets of the community. And so don't make it too cumbersome or complicated. It should be something that is very simple, easy for people to take, easy for people to provide input as it relates to this. So it's really important for us to really understand that. And your district LEA advisory committees really should reflect the site level. So it should be very similar. So whatever you establish as a LEA advisory, you should look at similar component or similar infrastructure within your site level advisory. All of those key pieces are super important. So again, these are things that we'll continue to work through, continue to develop. Remember that this is a long haul process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. So we really want to be very intentional about putting these things in place and really seeking some support and looking at best practices that are out there. Don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to, but also look at your local context in terms of that implementation. So again, kudos to all the celebrations and everything that you're working on. It's important for everybody to again learn from each other as we learn together. And I noticed that one person today is their first day in implementation. Great. It's always a good start. So always, even if we have to start today, we got to move forward from here. And so it's always good to, wherever you are and wherever your team is, wherever your school is, this is where we begin that process. So great for you to be here. So the other thing that we really moved into was really these 4 pillars. And when we look at the research behind community schools, the research over and over and over comes back to these 4 pillars. And these 4 pillars are foundational to community schools. They're part of the framework. They're one of our 4x4s. And this was the discussion and the conversation around our first workshop. Our first workshop was around the 4 pillars. The second workshop was around the 4 proven practices. So within the 4 pillars and them being foundational, and we have to remember that when we think about community schools, it tends to come back to these 4 pillars, that we're talking about integrated student support. That means that anything that is involved in supporting the student is what integrated supports is that whole child approach, the whole student approach in terms of that support. What do they need for them to be successful? At the end of the day, we want them to be in school. We want them to progress and we want them to be successful. What does that mean? The second one is family and community engagement. It is critical. We cannot detach our students from our families and community. And so the reason why family community engagement is a critical pillar in community schools is because we want to make sure that we not only have great students, healthy environments within our school, but we have healthy communities and families. And so the community component is very important as we engage with our students and families in helping them to be successful. The third one is that collaborative leadership piece that I spoke about earlier, that is really building trust. And some of you have asked that question, and it continues to be a big question. How do we engage our leaders? How do we engage our teachers in this process? Part of it is an awareness piece. It's important that we continue to share what community schools is. It's important that we continue to share the framework for community schools. I think if you have a grant, whether it be a planning grant or an implementation grant, that is your leverage to have the right conversation with your schools and your teams. Okay, so if you have a grant, that's your leverage to say, hey, I need you to be a part of this implementation. It's important for us to work together. So that collaborative leadership really requires all of your partners to be at the table, your parents, your students, your community members, your staff, both your leadership staff as well as your certificated, your teachers and classified staff. So everybody should be at the table because it really takes a village, and that's a cliche, right? It does take a village for our students to be successful. That's why collaborative leadership is important. So again, that's one of critical pillars for community schools. And finally, the extended learning time and opportunities. That pillar is critical because when we're talking about the ultimate goal of community schools, it's about our students being successful. college, career, and life ready. That is the ultimate goal of community schools. So the idea behind extended learning opportunities is really about how do we provide opportunities for kids that they otherwise would not have if it wasn't for us, because we want them to be competitive. We want them to have high expectations in terms of their future. And so we can do that through this extended learning time and opportunity. And I know that it really outlines maybe a before school, after school, and summer program, but the reality is that extended learning time and opportunity really is also part of the day, part of the in-class time. How are we providing these opportunities embedded into the class time? And we'll talk a little bit more as we move forward for today. But again, the 4 pillars are the foundation for community schools, and it is part of the framework. So that's what we talked about in our first workshop. So I want to take us through the kind of a process, because a lot of times we think about community schools and we feel overwhelmed because there's a lot to do. I want us to think that community schools is a sequential process that we need to be mindful. So I would argue that the first step in our community schools implementation is about defining our shared identity, our shared purpose, defining collaborative leadership, and really doing a really solid need and assets assessment, and really focusing on our collective priorities. And so that is foundational. We need to, as a team, think about what's the purpose? Why do we have community schools? Why is that important? Once we understand that and we can rally around that, then we can start to align all of our efforts into that. And so again, that begins, and that is the foundational piece. In step two, we start to define that vision for readiness. And I'm talking about what's the ultimate goal of community schools. The ultimate goal is college, career, and life ready. And so if that's the ultimate goal, what does that look like for us in high school, middle school, elementary school, or any alternative ed program that we serve? What does that look like in terms of us preparing our kids for their future? So that's that shared vision for readiness. The other piece that's critical in this stage, second stage, is really how are we setting the expectation and the goals? How are we communicating with all of our different groups that are within our school? And how are we engaging our family? How are we aligning our LCAP and our SBSA? How are we creating coherence with all of our policies and initiatives? And how are we really doing an inventory of our partnerships and really seeking those strategic partnerships that we need to help our students? So again, those are the first 2 steps for implementation. And if you're just starting, I want you to be mindful of these two steps. Think about them in a holistic way. I think that might be easier for you to approach your implementation, but they are foundational. And from the last 2 workshops, our focus has been on these 2 steps, okay? So for today, we're going to move into that 3rd step of a student-centered classroom. Because as we know, if we have those other 2 pieces in place, we're able then to move into that classroom, okay? And we're able to really be mindful of what is the intent of the law, what is the intent of the community schools implementation as it relates to the impact to the classroom. So moving into the next 4x4 and the next framework is the conditions for learning. Okay, and so within the conditions for learning, we have 4 elements. And again, remember, the framework has 4 4x4s. So we've already talked about 2. We've talked about the pillars. We talked about the proven practices. So this is number 3. This is the conditions for learning. So the idea behind this really is about providing the foundation that is necessary for the 4 pillars. So how do we make those 4 pillars essential? How do we ensure that that happens? That's the first piece. The second piece is how do we ensure that there's the relational piece to the students, to the families, and to the community? Okay, those 2 things are kind of the lens that we want to see these conditions for learnings through, that these really are what's going to make that work within the classroom. And so the first one is really that supportive environmental condition. In this case, it is about ensuring that our kids feel connected and belong, that we make it to where the students is the center of the classroom, and that they're feeling like that what they are doing is relevant because they know that we care. That's that really supportive environment. The second piece is productive instructional strategies. that support and motivated our students. So it's an intentionality that we're talking about. Remember, at the end of the day, we want our kids to be prepared. At the end of the day, we want our kids to be successful. And so what intentionality are we providing? What strategies are we ensuring that allows us to be able to help our students be self-advocacy and have that confidence within within their academic preparation? So again, the instructional strategies is important. The third piece is the social emotional. We know that we can connect and we can look at the habits, we can look at the mindsets, we can look at all of these pieces as we see how our students are connecting and how we are ensuring that that interpersonal is developed both for our students and our classrooms, so everybody feels like they can develop naturally. And then the third one is really the systems of support. And here we're talking about MTSS. We're talking about all of those elements that we need to have in place when our students start to struggle. Okay, so we're going to go deeper with each of these elements. I wanted to just introduce them to you, but it is important that we understand that this is part of the framework. This is part of the expectation of your implementation for community schools. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Alexa to give us directions as to what we're going to be working on.
All right, all right. Thank you so much, Manuel. So as he stated, we are going to break off into 4 different breakout rooms. Each breakout room is going to focus on one of the 4 conditions of learning. All right, so I'll be facilitating one, Manuel will be facilitating one, Elise will facilitate one, and Michelle will facilitate one. We are going to be in these groups for 30 minutes. So we're going to have a lot of time together to dive in and to discuss and to build our own deeper understanding of the condition that we are focusing on. Part of this activity is that it's like a jigsaw. So when we come back, we're going to ask a member of our group to present your findings, share what stood out to you, share a little bit about the condition. So just want to prep whoever is going to step into the brave space to share that we will have one of the participants from our groups share out at the end. So real quick recap, we're going to split y'all into 4. You got 30 minutes with one of the lovely Inflection staff members, and then we're going to share out our findings at the end of this activity.
Well, you have earned a break. We know we got really engaged in our discussions and our conversations, and so it was nice to be able to really go deep or deeper with this framework. And so we're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute break, and only 5 minutes for you to stretch and get a little bit something to drink. And then we'll come back at 3:43. We'll come back at 3:43. So let's take a quick break and come back. Alexa, if you don't mind playing some music, and then once the music is off, that means that we're all back. Yay, well, welcome back, everybody. Am I on time? All right, well, welcome back. Thank you so much for your breakouts. I know that my breakout was very engaging, a lot of discussion, a lot of ideas were generated. And so really appreciate that. So we want to hear from all of our groups. Hopefully everybody's back from their break. And so we're going to go ahead and hear from all of our groups. So as Alexa said, this is going to be a jigsaw. And so it's going to be important for us to kind of come back and share the ideas, the takeaways, the things that we felt were the critical aspects of our condition for learning. So these are the questions that hopefully will help generate the thoughts about what was discussed. Which condition for learning did we explore? So as you share, please state that condition for learning. What were the thoughts, beliefs, and stories that have changed, that have been challenged during, or that were challenged during our conversation? What thoughts, beliefs, or stories sparked your interest? And how does this condition make space to empower students? And so these are just some guiding questions, but I think all of you probably already have an idea as to how you want to share out your own group. And so we're going to go ahead and start with my group 1, which is supportive environmental conditions. And for us, Cynthia Salas is going to share.
Thank you, Linda. So in our group, we discussed the importance of how to make a student feel supported. Everybody shared different examples of what would be needed, access to resources, as well as access to a space that is welcoming for a student. We also touched on the importance of being culturally aware and practicing cultural humility and meeting people where they're at. We also touched on the importance of creating support mechanisms for students that don't have those types of support mechanisms in place, whether they come from home or other structures within school. So that led us a bit into our discussion about the importance of also partnering with community partners and ensuring that they are front and center and understanding the needs of our schools or our students. Yvette did a great job. Her example stood out to me the most in regards to access through language, that it's important that we provide information to our families in their preferred language, given that we can provide every single resource possible to help a family thrive or a student thrive, but without being able to communicate that to a student or to a family, the resources will not be used appropriately or used at all. And I think the other thing we also discussed was shared was the importance of reflecting on what creates a positive space for ourselves. What do we, from our lived experience, what experiences and key things make us feel like a space is welcoming to us as individual, and using that as a marker to think about, are we creating those spaces for other students or families? And we touched a little bit on the assessment piece and how the assessment part has to be inclusive of community in order to be supportive, and in order for us to be able to make sure that we're creating systems and environments that meet the needs of those that are going to use the services. And is a way also to check our own biases as professionals, as well-intended folks that want to create solutions, but they might not be the best solutions for those that we're trying to serve. And also the importance of engaging our community agency partners, given that they also have their own assessments, but sometimes the assessments do not reflect or collectively bring together all the data from the families that we serve due to access, even sometimes to their own service. And I'm going to pause to see if there's anything else our group would like to add. Oh, I just realized my camera was off. I'm sorry. I would like to add to the discussion that I might have overlooked. I want to be mindful of time.
Anybody want to add anything? Chrissy, I don't mind to, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think you touched on that data piece in terms of how do we get to the belonging and connection of students in the classroom. Do you mind sharing it with a larger group? Because I think it's something important to share that everybody may be interested in.
Okay, no problem. Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen McLean. I'm with Pajaro Valley Unified School District. 32 schools, 15,000 students, starting with 25 community schools. So prior to applying for the grants and whatnot, we had been already using the Youth Truth Survey every year, and that's for families, students and staff, and we have been very good at getting participation, more than 95% participation with the families. And so that's just one like annual way that we could look at certain things like belonging, plus a lot of other factors, how well schools communicate with you, are they meeting your needs, things like that. But on the more at the school level, I don't know if any of you have heard of Sown to Grow before, but we've used Sown to Grow for the last few years, and it's a web-based social emotional curriculum. It also has a survey that surveys social emotional competencies and sense of belonging, as well as a weekly social emotional check-in. So we give the survey twice a year to sort of see where we can grow social emotionally together, and then also the sense of belonging. But the real power is that day-to-day, that weekly social emotional check-in, where we can identify through those weekly questions when students are feeling disconnected, and we can help them feel reconnected. And it has helped teachers build relationships in classes, and definitely help students sort of not be afraid to reach out for help. And then for ones that don't really need help, feeling a little more seen. But that data on a regular basis is so helpful.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you, Cynthia, for sharing for group one. Let's give them snaps. Good job, everybody. Good job, Cynthia. Good job, Chrissy. Thank you. All right, let's move on to group two. Group two, you had the productive instructional strategies. So who's going to present for group two?
I was voluntold to, but I don't mind. So we started with discussing like what our classrooms look like at our sites. Right now, like how our most vulnerable student might describe our classrooms. And a lot of us said that they would probably describe safe and welcoming, but some variation of probably difficult or challenging as far as curriculum. And that they don't always describe it like that. They might describe it as I'm bored, and when they may mean it's challenging. We discussed that professional development for like ELL teachers would be really helpful to empower our students, or ELL students, giving them more strategies on how to support them to participate and be more engaged, to give them more of a voice. And what can be really challenging in that respect could be that teachers don't realize that they really can't participate without those strategies. That sometimes the mindset of ELL students needing specific strategies so they can be engaged can be a challenging thing for teachers to understand. Also, we talked about supporting teachers with like anxious students. So an example was coming back from the pandemic, and a lot of students coming back with maybe some social emotional needs that like a handful of mental health professionals won't be able to support on their own. And just explaining like basic structure, routines, and expectations could really support those vulnerable students feeling safe at their school. And then also explaining to teachers that some grade levels, like, you know, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade students may not have the skills of 4th, 5th, 6th grade students coming back from the pandemic because they didn't have the practice that they needed. The next was, we talked about teachers providing, having concerns about constant change in curriculum. So sounds like there's a lot of talk about like, maybe we should change the curriculum because it's too hard for students, or maybe we need to add student voice to the curriculum. And what this ends up doing is it causes a lot of stress on the teachers because they always have to learn something new. And it just puts more stress on them, thinking like, what's going to happen next year? What's going to happen the year after that? Are we going to always change the curriculum? Or and then having just the opportunities for them to grow together and to have the opportunity to figure out like what the students need. That could be challenging too, just where the students are in general. We also talked about the influence of technology and how it's impacted the students, that it could be more of a distraction and a prevention of learning. We actually, at my site, we just got this thing called Go Guardian, where a teacher found out that a lot of the students weren't actually doing work. And she was very excited to have Go Guardians and that she could start monitoring that. But she's like, oh my gosh, how long has this been happening? So maybe shifting back to how things used to be done, paper and pen, and the way things used to be done back before technology. And then one of the biggest challenges in general in this area is just that mindset of teachers feeling like they need to have their kids at grade level. A lot of what I mentioned with my group is that I talk with the teachers a lot. I'm a school psychologist, and one of the things I have to mention to them all the time is we don't expect them to be at grade level, and we don't expect them to have them at grade level. We just need to see growth, and that we feel like they're doing a great job as teachers if we see the growth. And I've had multiple teachers tell me we really need to hear that more often. So that was eye-opening for me as a school psychologist, and that was one thing that we also talked about as well. And is there anything that I missed from my team if they want to?
Well, I'm gonna volunteer somebody else to speak up, Tiffany, because we ended our conversation with, like, in a perfect world, how does this condition of productive instructional strategies empower students? And Tiffany brought up a very, very great phrase that I'm writing down and going to put into my library. So Tiffany, would you mind speaking up and talking a little bit about rightful presence, or having a rightful presence in the classroom?
Yeah, thank you. And it's a term that I'm only starting to learn more about myself, but the Office of Justice has been writing about it, SWIFT organization, if you are familiar with the work of SWIFT, and also within our California system of support. Rightful presence is something that's kind of been lifted up, but even in the way that what are some of our underlying beliefs that maybe we don't see, that we have blinders on, that can impede student involvement in the classroom. And an example of this would be, we talk about inclusion. How might we include our students with disabilities? And we say that phrase, how might we include students with disabilities? Or I do inclusion, or we do inclusion, or we have inclusive practices. And that's all good. And another way to consider it is, instead of inclusion being something that we do, is it a way of being? And even in the term including, right, if we're saying come students from our special day class, or our English learners who need intensive instruction, sure, we're going to include you in the general ed setting. Even that idea of inclusion, which might come with good intent, comes with unintentional power dynamics. If we're inviting you to be included, then that means that at some point, there's this mental model of exclusion. And so instead, how can we create a culture of rightful presence? It's not that this is group A and group B, but all of us, this is all of us.
I love that. Oh my God. Amazing, amazing report from group 2. Let's give them all a snaps all around, because they were amazing. And just, again, a lot of this is resonating. A lot of this is just helping us to be mindful of how do we ensure that our kids not only are coming, but that we're providing the best opportunity for them to be successful. And these strategies just help with that. We got to take away a lot of the things that become barriers for them to learn. And so thank you for that input. So group three had social emotional learning. So who's going to share for group 3?
Well,
We're not sure, Manuel.
Somebody will share the great wisdom that was discussed, or great wisdom that was shared.
Irma was so excited to share for this, and I'm just kidding. Thank you, Irma, for sharing now. It was a voluntold situation too.
She said that's what I get for turning off my camera at the moment she was asking.
She did the virtual look away. She turned her camera off, so I called on her.
That is a teacher strategy, by the way.
Right.
Thank you, Irma.
We discussed the social emotional learning, and I really liked how we started, at least started it was because she kind of got us to think about the villains and, and how their actions, how do we think or go about thinking that their actions can be justified, as, they have become who they are because of prior experiences or how they were treated themselves. So, and going with that is that, kind of looking into how social emotional learning is very important, and it should be connected to the success of like students' academic success. Because if they're coming to school or dealing with some social emotional issues, then how are we expecting them to to learn? We're not even dealing with their needs or what they're maybe going through. Let's see. As we know that in order for them to be very successful academically or be able to learn, we gotta think about what are they going through? How are they going to learn if they have this on them? So kind of really important for us to kind of consider, teaching the social emotional learning inside the classroom. And how do we go about doing that? It's like, reading or incorporating, let me see, incorporating or teaching about, friendship, teaching about, how can we help one another? If there's bullying or emotions, to be able to deal with that in order to then later on have them kind of pay attention, because if all those emotions are kind of in their way, and it's like that's kind of like an obstacle or barrier that's not letting them or leading them to be successful. So it's really important that we consider the social emotional learning inside the classroom and incorporating it for student success. So anything else? And my thoughts and beliefs, I'm one of those students that, I got to go through a lot of experiences that some of our kids are do. So I go hand on hand. So, that for me was a very, very hard to deal with. And you kind of learn because it's like, I should say, if you don't deal with that, it's like, it's really hard to focus on what you're being taught. And so many years, if nobody's catching attention to that or cannot see that or think beyond, okay, the behaviors and, they're being disrespectful. We can't go on and look into further down deep inside to find out, okay, what is the reason? But then obviously those years are also those big gaps that later on in years we have. And that's why, I myself am dealing with that, and I'm, getting there. I'm getting there successfully, which that's what I bring into the table for our own students that I work with. It's like looking beyond, trying to find further. And my best tool, my best thing that I keep on saying, home visits, it's a #1 key where we can get a lot of great information. And that's what I learned through the migrant education program. So.
Love it, love it, love it. Thank you, Irma. Awesome. Let's give her snaps all the way around. Thank you. You brought up a very, very good point. And that whole social emotional, the interpersonal skills that need to be explicitly taught is very important. And I think many times we don't stop and realize how, what has made us successful. And it's the interpersonal skills, right? For us to be resilient, for us to be able to manage ourselves in all of these ways. And so all of these things have to be explicitly taught if we want our kids to learn. If we want our kids to be able to exist, we can't expect them to already have that. And so do we have that as an intentionality in our lesson design, in our classrooms? One of the things that recently I read is there's an organization called Knowledge Works. And Knowledge Works looks at the future of skills, and they look to 2040, for example, and say, okay, in 2040, what is the business world looking for in terms of skills? So now that we have our kids today, they're going to be adults in 2040. And what skills are they going to need to know and be able to do to be successful? So we have to be looking at that, because that's, we're preparing our kids for the future. We're preparing our kids for jobs that may not exist. And so the #1 thing that they talk about is these interpersonal skills. And it's so the social emotional empathy skills that our kids need to be able to learn for their future career. So anyway, we'll pass on that resource for you guys to see, but it's pretty powerful in terms of what, we in education should be doing now in terms of the skills that we need to be teaching our kids to be successful. So love that. Thank you, Irma. Group four. Group four, you had systems of support. Who's going to share for group four?
So I was voluntold also, so I will be sharing.
Thank you, Carmen.
So systems of support that enable healthy development, respond to student needs, and address learning barriers. That's what we were discussing. And so in our discussion, it sounds like a lot of us have some great things going on. It sounds like a lot of our sites are using SEL programs. We have behavior techs. We also have mental health counselors. Some schools even have family counselors, food banks in the parking lot, food and nutrition services who do lots of great workshops for their students and for their families. And it's just a matter, we have all this great resources for our community, right? For our students and our parents, but how do we make it so this way we're all collaborating, how we're not working in silos? So that is something that I think we all are working towards under this new community schools, is making sure that we're all under the same umbrella and we're all working together. One topic that we did talk about was how to destigmatize mental health in our communities. You know, that was something that we discussed, and a lot of schools are doing outreach to their students during lunchtime, providing different activities, even after school. They're having meetings or workshops for parents because they're finding that maybe the students are not the ones who are stigmatized. They're fine talking about, you know, what's going on with them, but it might be the parents, and that might be more of a cultural deal. You know, we have a lot of Latino families who don't believe that their child is suffering from any type of mental health issues. So how do we educate our families? We also feel that, you know, we want to create, welcoming schools where students feel safe, you know, at our schools. And so providing different resources to those students, such as like the mental health counselor, and making sure that our mental health counselors are approachable, right? Making sure that students feel safe going to them. And I think for the most part, all the folks that were in my group feel like their mental health counselors are very approachable to their students. Let me see. One way we can look at making sure and educating our community is possibly looking at SEL data or behavior data or attendance data, and asking the community for their input on, you know, what changes need to take place in order to improve our attendance, in order to improve our behavior issues, and so forth. Gosh, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. If anyone wants to chime in from my group, feel free.
I'll throw one thing out, and if I think it was maybe Babette who shared this, but I think that making the connection between why SEL supports and vision supports and dental supports helps students learn and be successful seemed really important in the way that this is communicated to families. And so I really appreciate hearing that connecting to the priorities that your families already have is a way to make it so that it's a shared value. It's not just, oh, this is something we need for kids, but really it connects to what they already want for their kids too. So it's not you telling them, it's just showing that connection with what they already know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you, Carmen. Let's give them all a snaps all the way around. Yay, great job. Again, oh my God, thank you for your sharing out of all the groups. I think, again, all of you did an amazing job of really helping us understand what the conditions for learning are in terms of, and also why they're so important and why the state said they're critical for the implementation of community schools. So we're going to make it part of the framework. We're going to make it part of what everybody needs to be doing. And so again, it's part of this ongoing conversation and calibration of what this means. So thank you for all this information. So as we think about the conditions for learning, we now have to look at where we are in terms of this stage, right? We really have laid the foundation through step 1, through step 2, to really get into the instruction. And as you just experienced, it's probably one of the harder things because there's so many levels to what's happening in the classroom. There's so many levels in terms of the structures and system that we already have that can be a barrier to what we're trying to do. We talked a lot about the importance of family and ensuring that we are making those connections within the classroom. And so as we think about the student-centered learning focus or environment, that we are intentional with the curriculum, that we're intentional with the pedagogy, we're intentional with the professional learning, and that we're elevating student voice and student empowerment. We talked about some examples of how to collect that data about students, but also how do we create that student agency for them to really be in control of their learning. And so I think that through each of the groups, we actually got some really good, solid examples of how we can create that environment. So let's be mindful of that, that's really what we're trying to do with that next step is how do we impact instruction so our students do feel empowered, so our students do feel that they have that control and that they can find that relevance in what they're learning and really, be in control of that. And so, so thank you. So as we move forward, I want us to be mindful of what that means. And so I'm going to give you some statements. So, well, actually, let me go back to those because I think it's important not to overlook that. When we think about the 20 years, 10 lessons, these are some of the things that I think we pulled out to kind of validate this conversation, right? That community schools takes an asset-based approach and builds on the strengths of community schools and individuals. So this is, again, a very powerful piece from the 20 years, 10 lessons that we can use to validate for our schools and our community why this is important. And again, I think you very, very explicitly described this in each of your groups. The next lesson is really around a good student support system cannot compensate for a weak core instructional program. And so we have to make sure that we do this very intentionally. It's about high expectations. It's about access to the curriculum. I think one of the groups, it was I believe it was group 2, talked about, how do we ensure that at the basic level, we're ensuring that we're providing the right resources so our students access the curriculum, because we are talking about having them grow academically, and confidence level, but it's really about maintaining high expectations through our instructional design and our structural program. So again, this is a big component and hopefully a big takeaway that we are talking about quality instruction and we are talking about quality pedagogy and engaging our students in their learning so they can feel empowered that they are in control of their education. So love it. So what I want us to do now is I want us to now be very reflective about our current situation and where we currently are in terms and as it relates to our instructional practice or instructional program, and really self-assess, where are we, so we can define it, so we can then be able to really think about what our next steps will be and what our actions will be. So I'm going to give you 4 statements. And when I give you the statement, I want you to reflect on that statement. And then I want you in the chat, I want you to rate yourselves and where you are. And this, I'm talking about your current setting, right? Rate yourselves from 1 being low and 4 being high. So based on the statement, you say, you know what, we're not there. We're not even close. Or maybe we're kind of getting there, but we're not quite there. Or maybe we're hitting it out of the park and absolutely we are a 4. And so when you rate yourself between a 1 and a 4, this is just a holistic way of rating yourself. So there's no scientific, answer. But once you rate yourself and you say, I'm a 1, I'm a 2, I'm a 3, I'm a 4, I want you to tell me why. Why did you state that you were a 1, a 2, and 3, or 4? That hopefully will give you, and what I would call, that would be the evidence behind your rating, but it also will help you to identify what might be your next step. So in that thinking, you might spark an idea that you said, you know what, I think that I need to do that. I need to provide specific information to certain group or certain person, whatever that may be. It might trigger some thoughts that may generate an action. So take note of that as well. Okay. So here goes the first statement. Okay. Remember, I want you to rate yourself from a 1 to a 4, 1 being low, 4 being high. And then I want you to give me evidence behind your rating. Okay. So the first statement is, the student experience is guided by student interest and emphasizes self-knowledge and student agency. So we're talking about our school site. And if you're at a county and you were a teacher before, maybe that you want to think about it from that perspective. Or if you're at a county and you're supporting schools, think about what, in general, what do your schools that you support look like as it relates to this? So again, first statement, the student experience is guided by student interest and emphasizes self-knowledge and student agency. So go ahead and think about, how would you rate yourself? 1 being low, 4 being high, and then provide evidence for your rating. I'm going to give you a minute. Go ahead and put it into the chat. Don't forget to provide evidence. So how would you rate yourself as a school as it relates to this statement? 1 being low, 4 being high. Give you another 20 seconds. Beautiful. Thank you. So I see a lot of 2s. I see a lot of 2s. Anybody want to share why they rated themselves a 2?
I'll share, and I'm gonna break the rule because I actually put a 3, but only for our high schools. Because we have a very, very rich CTE program with multiple pathways that students can choose from. Even, you can choose, if you're gonna take ag science, do the 3-year ag science pathway as opposed to bio, physics. There's all kinds of choice in that way for students in the high school.
Beautiful. Thank you, Chrissy. And again, I appreciate that you kind of say, it depends, sometimes the school might be like a 2.5. We're not quite a 2, we're kind of more towards a 3 because we have been doing some things. So I love that. But, again, be reflective. This is the intent that this is what we want to create. The next question. Approaches to learning, which are universal practices and additional supports, are shaped by student voice and choice. So based on your current reality, meaning your current school or district or county office, how you support schools, but this is based on a site. Approaches to learning, which are universal practices, additional supports, are shaped by student voice and choice. So rate yourself 1, 2, 3, or 4, and give evidence to that rating in the chat, please. Yeah. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. Thank you for your honesty. And again, yeah, I mean, when we think about this and we talk about a student-centered classroom and a community-centered classroom, we got to be honest and we got to be very mindful of where we are as it relates to that. And so part of what our next steps may be to really shift mindsets. What does that mean? Provide professional learning. What does that mean? And so again, as we think about this intent, we have to be mindful of what it is that we're trying to create in the environment that we're trying to create. So love that. Okay, the next one is every student encounters an engaging, empowering, and inclusive learning environment. So go ahead and rate yourselves 1, 2, 3, or 4, and then say why you rate yourself that way as it relates to this statement. Every student encounters an engaging, empowering, and inclusive learning environment. Go ahead and put it in the chat. I love that. 1.5, 2.5. All right, every student encounters an engaging, empowering, and inclusive learning environment. That's our hope. That's our vision. Where are we as it relates to that statement? Go ahead and put it into the chat. Yes. Thank you for being very specific. Okay, we have one more. So go ahead and finish this one off if you haven't put it into the chat, because you have a lot of great ideas and really are being mindful of these questions. The last statement is self-reflection and goal orientation are integral to every student's regular learning experience. Self-reflection and goal orientation are integral to every student's regular learning experience. Okay, so how would you rate yourselves? 1, 2, 3, and 4, and go ahead and put into the chat and also the why behind your rating. Reflection is a critical part of learning. And all the research talks about how important reflection is in that process. So how would you rate yourselves? Self-reflection and goal orientation are integral to every student's regular learning experience. It's what we value. Love that. Thank you. Go ahead and put that into the chat. Great. Thank you, everybody. Continue to put it into the chat. You know, you talked a little bit about how do we engage, especially if we're a 1 or a 2. You know, go through these statements with the team. Go through these statements with the team, and there's gonna be a lot of very rich discussion. And ask each member of the team to rate themselves. You're gonna find that different people have different perspectives as it relates to this. But again, an understanding and saying, you know, are we? And if we're not, how do we get there? How do we get that every student encounters an engaging, empowering, inclusive learning environment? If we're not there yet, how are we going to get there? And again, that will generate your discussion, that will generate your actions. So this is kind of a self-assessment. Hopefully you can utilize it for having those rich discussions and getting to the next level of really providing an amazing learning environment for your students. So with that, I know we only have a little bit of time, so I'm going to turn over to Elise, who's going to walk us through the final steps.
All right. So how do we do? Well, you have that thought in your head right now. We'd love for you to take a few minutes and take this really quick survey. Y'all have done a really good job on the past too. It just lets us know, you know, how we're doing. It gets direct feedback from you in the moment while it's still fresh in your head. So go ahead and scan that QR code. There's going to be a link dropped in the chat, I'll drop it in the chat. Let me put it in there. And I'll give you a few minutes to fill that out. So you can use your phone or you can click on this link right here. And then while you're doing that, once you go ahead and click on and open that link, I'm going to drop another link in the chat and do some promo for a couple of upcoming workshops that we have going on. So our crowdsourced coffees are they're very similar in style to this, or they're shortened, so they're an hour-long workshops where we will tackle a really specific topic, and then you'll walk away with a ready to go, done for you resource or tool that you can use with your leadership teams. And so just in our conversation around like step 3 today, I think that these two are actually really fitting. So the first one is on May 9th, and it's on empathy interviews and how to use empathy interviews to enhance instruction. So especially for the shout out to the folks that were in the SEL group with me, we definitely really kind of hit on the connection between what's going on in terms of SEL and academic outcomes. So this is really huge. So that's coming up May 9th at 8:30. Oh, and condition 2, folks. I know it probably relates to everyone. And then the second one is May 13th, and that one is going to be co-hosted by a group called NXU, and they are the SEL curriculum specialists. And so they're going to be going through how to, with fidelity and with sustainability, effectively implement SEL. We know you all are recipients of community schools grants, so getting this new directive can be really daunting. And we even talked about in our group, some people don't, especially in the classroom, may not see their responsibility or their connection to SEL. So this will help kind of walk through that. And again, you'll be able to walk away with a couple of resources to take back to your leadership team. So the RSVP link for that one, I'll drop in the chat. It is right there. So those are our 2 crowdsources coming up in the month of May. And like I said, I think both would be really, if you want to take a deep dive into either SEL or the tool of, using empathy interviews to enhance instruction, I definitely check it out. So we'll see you there. Now to get to the resources, and I saw it in the chat, folks were asking, where do I, get the resources talked about? Where do I get a copy of the slides? I went in and added that. So if you're looking before and you didn't see it, it's in there right now. So sorry about that. But you can scan that QR code to get into your room, or drop that in the chat for you. You can access this link, and it's the same link that we use for each workshop. And so you'll see all 3 of the slide decks are, you know, the 20 years, 10 lessons article, other resources that we've talked about will be in there. So you can go ahead and access that link. And with that, Manuel, I'll toss it over to you.
Thank you, Elise. Again, it was a pleasure to see everybody again. We're looking forward to seeing you in person. Super excited. Remember that those of you that are in the northern part of the region, that is San Benito, Santa Cruz, and Monterey, we'll see you on May 15th. And then those of you that are in San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and Ventura, we'll see you on May 21st. And again, I hope that you bring a team. I hope that you're there with a team because we really want to engage with that. We're going to go to the next level. We're going to go to now we're going to be talking about 4 and the 5 step. Now that we've laid the foundation with all of the groundwork, now we're going to talk about the cornerstone commitments, which many times are the hardest ones to talk about. And so that's going to be our next process. So even if you had a team member that was not there or has not been here through the workshops, we'll still do a recap just to kind of bring everybody up to speed, make sure everybody's on the same page before we get into our activities and our discussion. But we will go deeper, and we hopefully will be able to really create some really solid structure for you as you move forward in your implementation for the remainder of the year, and then getting ready for the following year. So again, we're here to support you. I want to thank our Monterey County Office of Education and our Central Coast RTAC for all of your support in bringing this together, and also being available to support all of our schools in this important implementation. So with that, I want to wish you well, and I will see you in person on the 15th or on the 21st. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you for being here.